Another key question in terms of what is federalism and how does it work is nullification. Both Kentucky and Virginia made resolutions that suggested that states have the right to declare a federal law null and void, meaning no good. This question was solved by the Civil War, and it said that states cannot declare a constitutional act unconstitutional, thereby giving more power to the federal government and giving more credence to the Supremacy Clause. So contrary to what this image says, states cannot nullify federal law. Thus far, we've really seen up until this point in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that the Supreme Court, as well as other decisions made throughout the government, have given more power back to the national government. This reversal, giving power back to the states, is what we call devolution. Devolution, again, meaning more power given back to the states. An example of devolution is the U.S. versus Lopez. In U.S. versus Lopez, it was a national law was challenged that prohibited guns at school. In U.S. versus Lopez, the Supreme Court made the decision that Congress had exceeded the Commerce Clause, and that the Commerce Clause does not include everything. Deficits at the national government level have encouraged devolution. The national government is not always good about spending money, and so they often turn over some grant and aid programs, such as welfare and Medicaid, back to the states, and they become block grants where there are general purposes. Thus, we see national programs being enforced through the states, which is something we mentioned early on as a part of the definition of federalism. As a result of these grants and aid, we have seen an increase in cooperative federalism. Cooperative federalism being the marble cake federalism. If you look at the cake on your computer screen, you can't get just a bite of chocolate or just a bite of yellow cake, that it's all mixed together. This is in contrast to what had been previously, which is dual federalism. Think about layer cake. If you don't like the pink strawberry cake, you eat around it. You can still eat the yellow or the chocolate cake. Thus, again, to summarize, grants and aid being given to the state level, this money being spent at the federal money being spent at the state level, has increased cooperative federalism. When we talk about federalism, we also need to talk about funding. Goodness only knows everybody wants funding, even the aliens, haha. We want to go through a couple of different types of grants and ways that the federal and state government share money. First, we want to talk about categorical grants. These are going to fall under federal law for a very specific purpose, such as an airport or a college dorm. Categorical grants often require state or local governments to put up some money as well. Categorical grants have strings attached, such as non-discrimination clauses, etc. So categorical grants are rather limiting for the state or local government. Our next type of grant and aid is a block grant. These local governments receive money. There are fewer strings attached, and they support broad programs such as community development. There could be a variety of things that fall into the category of helping for community development. So that's a block grant. That's going to be a little bit more broad. Revenue sharing is relatively rare. You usually see revenue sharing when there is a budget surplus, which doesn't occur very often. That would be where the federal government provides aid without requirement to match, and it can be spent on almost anything. So when you look at the list on the review sheet, categorical are the most specific, revenue sharing would be the most broad. There is competition between areas. Local governments and state governments have staffs in Washington, D.C. in an effort to compete for grants as well as to lobby. More grants are now distributed based on a formula which means that grants are given out automatically and more objectively. This is one of the reasons that the census is very important. Unfortunately, Green Township has been one of the areas that has had the highest turn-in ratio, so that's pretty exciting. Hopefully Delhi will do well as one of the first slides that we looked at was the two little boys sharing a toy. We said that federalism often means sharing, but as I'm sure those two little boys could have told you 1 minute after that picture was taken, that sharing can be very, very difficult. And oftentimes we see the federal government telling the states what to do, which is referred to as a mandate. All of those grants and aid, which we just discussed, are ways that the federal government gives money to the state. However, it gives these conditions that the state government has to act in a certain way in order to receive this money. A mandate itself is when the federal government imposes its will from the outside onto the states in the context of grants, which are usually in regards to civil rights and environmental protection. States must comply with the federal standards, though sometimes mandates are written vaguely and a federal agency is given the power to decide exactly what state and local governments are supposed to do. Mandates can be a very good thing, but they can also be a huge burden. Take the example of Medicaid, and you'll have to excuse me, your review sheet says Medicare. Remember, care is for the old people. We're actually talking about Medicaid, which is for the poor people. So you're aiding the poor people, you're caring for the old people. And we are, again, just to make sure you guys are keeping up here, that we are talking about Medicaid. This was a mandate that had been administered by the states. Most people supported this program that had wide support, and Congress kept voting to expand Medicaid, and the states had a very difficult time keeping up as the federal government kept coming in to say this is something new that you have to do, etc., and more money that they had to hand out. So sometimes mandates can be a burden on the states. States particularly don't like mandates when they're unfunded. Congress will pass laws but not actually providing the funding. Think about American Disabilities Act, the ADA. This federal government did not give the states the money to actually go in and fix facilities. So old buildings where there were stairs everywhere but no elevator weren't necessarily fixed because the state struggled to keep up with this mandate. Another example is that gun buyers must have a background check, but it's the state government that has to enforce this and therefore pay for the background check, which often gets translated into a fee for the gun buyers. In terms of the state role between itself and federalism, they try to prevent a concentration of power at its inception of federalism. The power was supposed to be spread out. You'll have to excuse me, my computer's making funny noises. All right, I'm back. I think we're okay. No surprise that the computer's making funny noises, right? Okay, so back to the state's role as a part of federalism. Federalism was designed not to concentrate too much power in a specific area and also to expand democracy so that the states as well as the federal government had a democratic form of government, which are all good things. However, it has also created problems such as inequalities, some policies which are controlled by the federal government but are given to the states, and they have a difficult time actually enforcing that. Some policies are controlled by the federal government because of global technological, ecological, or societal change. All of these things have contributed to less of a role as far as the states. However, keep in mind the state is still central. And that brings our discussion of federalism to a close.